Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the state of Nevada and why Nevada is likely to be the GOP's best opportunity for a Senate pickup this fall. So of course we're going to take a look at some electoral history out of the state of Nevada, some recent elections, as well as the polling in the state overall, and factor in the likely national environment we're expected to see this fall to ultimately determine why this is probably going to be the case. And of course Nevada, along with Arizona and Georgia, are the three most contested Senate seats this cycle that are currently held by Democratic incumbents. Of course, Pennsylvania has retiring Republican incumbent Pat Toomey, so that's an open seat. So the rest of these three seats are seats currently occupied by Democrats. And in my opinion, Catherine Cortez Masto is the most vulnerable of these incumbents. And we'll get to why that is as we get through this video. So of course, before we begin, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoy. I'm going to try and upload daily content as best I can going through to the midterm elections, but of course I can't do that without your support. So looking at the race overall, Catherine Cortez Masto versus former Republican Attorney General Adam Laxalt. We've seen in the polling so far that Adam Laxalt has regained the lead over the month of September. Previously, Catherine Cortez Masto had been leading from August all the way back to May. You know, she was sort of enjoying this summer surge that Democrats were kind of enjoying post-Roe being overturned. But since then, especially through mid to late September, we've seen a sizable shift in the polling, not just in key swing states like Nevada, but also, of course, the generic ballot as a whole. And Republicans are starting to do better as polls factoring in likely voters sort of dominate the aggregates. You know, all of these polls are likely voter polls that Adam Laxalt is leading, and these are the people that are most likely to show up in November and actually vote. And the fact that Adam Laxalt is leading right now is certainly bad news for Cortez Masto, who's the incumbent in this race. Now, Nevada is still a blue state overall. Nevada hasn't voted for a Republican to federal office since 2012, when Dean Heller narrowly squeaked by a victory against his Democratic opponent. And of course, in 2018, he went on to lose that race by about 5 points against Jackie Rosen as an incumbent. Nevada is still a blue state overall. The fact that Laxalt is leading again is bad news for the Democrats. But factoring in the national environment we're likely to see this fall, which has Republicans doing better than Democrats overall, it's not at all surprising, especially given the fact that Nevada voted to the right of the national environment in 2020. In fact, all of the other swing states got more Democratic except Florida, and of course Nevada was a narrow shift to the right. And that's mainly because Clark County shifted 1.4 percentage points to the right, even as other population centers like Carson City and Washoe County, home to Reno, Nevada, shifted more Democratic. Clark County's shift to the right was enough to keep the state essentially stagnant to where it was in 2016 and a tad bit to the right as well. So going into 2022, of course, Adam Laxalt is going to really have to hammer home his margins in Clark County. He's going to have to do better than Donald Trump here, getting over 44% of the vote. If he gets around 46% of the vote, wins Washoe County, he certainly will win the state come November. Of course, he's also sharing the ballot with Joe Lombardo, who's running against Steve Sisolak, also a super close race at this point in time. So really, this is a seat that Democrats originally weren't too worried about. Again, going back a couple of months, Democrats were a lot more focused on flipping states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania because they sort of thought the momentum was on their side. And for a while it was, but there seems to have been a shift. Historical trends and, of course, just the history of midterm elections as a whole kind of turned against Democrats, because ultimately Democrats are the party in power, and of course midterms are a referendum on the party in power. So while Adam Laxalt is ahead 1.7% in the RCP average, 0.5% overall, Nevada is a state that does tend to oversample Republicans, and that has been the trend in the past. But in 2020, Nevada's RCP average of 2.4% for Joe Biden was actually spot on for the final result. So if that's any indicator whatsoever, Adam Laxalt is in a good position to flip this seat. And of course, Catherine Cortez Masto should be extremely worried, because Nevada is a key state that either party will need to secure the majority in the Senate. Now, out of the three toss-up Senate races that have Democratic incumbents, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, I think Catherine Cortez Masto is the weakest of these incumbents, mainly because she seems to be a shadow senator. She's somebody who isn't really at the forefront of any major policy decisions. She's not as well known as somebody like Mark Kelly or Raphael Warnock. She's somewhat more of a backbencher, and that's one of the reasons why I think she's not doing as well as she could be. Also, as a candidate, she really doesn't offer much to the general electorate besides being a generic Democrat. Of course, Mark Kelly has a very interesting background. He has a lot more fundraising. And of course, Raphael Warnock is a charismatic pastor from Martin Luther King's former church. So, of course, those two candidates are doing a lot better in their races. In some polls, they're really neck and neck. Mark Kelly's in the best position out of all of these candidates. He's consistently polling ahead of Blake Masters. He's not down in a single poll as of yet. Raphael Warnock is kind of neck and neck with his opponent. And of course, Catherine Cortez Masto has now been down consistently throughout the entire month of September. So, of course, that's a huge red flag overall. Also, as we mentioned earlier in 2020, all of these states that are currently up for grabs all shifted to the left except Nevada, which actually shifted slightly to the right. So if anything, I would expect Republicans to do better here than the other 3 states on this map that are currently toss-up races. Now, if we go back to 2016, during Catherine Cortez Masto's first election, she formerly was a member of the House, she beat her Republican opponent, Joe Heck, by 2.4%. Which is very interesting. That's the exact margin that Joe Biden would win the state in 2020, and of course the same margin that Hillary Clinton won the state on the presidential level. Now, Nevada in 2016 voted about in line with the national environment, but in 2020 it actually shifted to the right, despite the fact that Donald Trump was already president for 4 years. You had COVID, which was a huge drag down on his approval rating. Of course, you had the civil unrest over the summer of 2020, and yet Nevada still shifted slightly to the right despite all of this, and I think it's really significant, and I think it's a telling sign of where Nevada is headed politically for the years to come, because Nevada is a state that is overall trending in the Republicans' direction. They're doing better in places like Clark County. They're getting the best margins they've gotten there in decades, literally. And around the state as well. They've locked down the rural areas of the state, and their main focus now is shoring up support in Clark County. Again, 45%, 46% would bring it home for any Republican nominee, especially if there's a turnout differential. If these rural counties are turning out in a higher percentage than the urban counties, it's very much possible, because Nevada politics are really dominated by just these 2 counties, Washoe and Clark, and the margins that either party gets in these counties ultimately determines the outcome of the race. Winning Washoe County, and for Republicans, not doing terrible in Clark County, and of course for Democrats, they want to do as best they can in this area. So as we mentioned earlier, in 2018, Nevada was a state that threw out its Republican incumbent, Dean Heller, by a margin of 5 points in a blue wave election. Now, one thing I think is very significant about this race in particular is the fact that in all of the Nevada down ballot races, and this race included, Nevada voted to the right of the nation. The nation voted about 8 to 9 points in favor of the Democrats over the Republicans. Nevada, it was about 5 points or less, and some of these down ballot races were even closer. Of course, you have Adam Laxalt's race for governor against Steve Sisolak. He only lost his race by 4.1%. The attorney general race was extremely close. The Republican almost won this race. And of course, the secretary of state was actually won by the incumbent Republican this time around. So there was a blue wave around the country, and in some cases, it washed over Nevada as well. But in some races, Republicans did a lot better than expected down ballot. And Adam Laxalt did better than Dean Heller, who was an incumbent Republican at the time. Republicans are probably going to end up winning the generic ballot at the end of the day, at least by about a point or so, probably more if the momentum continues on their side. And I think with that being the case, Catherine Cortez Masto is almost certainly to go down at this point in time. Again, we have a little bit over a month. It's about 37 days until the midterm election. So obviously things can change. Democrats potentially could get the momentum, but again, history is sort of the Democrats' enemy this time around. Again, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, a lot of people thought that was going to have a huge impact on the midterms. In special elections, it certainly had an impact, but overall, Republicans are to benefit from the midterm environment just because that is how midterm elections typically are. Again, it's basically a rule of politics at this point in our current political paradigm that the party out of power is going to do better than the party in power after 2 years, and I think that's likely to continue to be the case this time around. It's one of the reasons why I've been so bullish on Adam Laxalt's chances throughout this entire midterm cycle. I've consistently had him up in the state of Nevada. There might have been one prediction where I had him down, but I think for the most part I've always had him winning the state because ultimately Nevada is trending more Republican. And I think the margin in Nevada will be better for Republicans than Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania at the end of the day. And potentially in 2024 and beyond, Nevada could be a state that is much more Republican leaning than it currently is. So anyway, thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a thumbs up down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. And as always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.